So good to see you again. So what we have seen up till now is the approach taken towards digitalization, right? And you understood how the breakpoints are constructed and why they should be done so that there are discrete steps that follow through, right? Now I mentioned there will be a framework that will be discussed to understand how the approach was taken into play. So we will talk about this hexagonal approach, which is a 6-step model, all right, and what goes into this. But before we dwell deeper into the framework, please understand at an organization level what sort of areas of digitization comes into existence, right? We saw that a little bit earlier on, but let's understand discretely as in a matrix format what is going on. So typical areas where digitization is focused upon in a larger organization is the customer area, the product area, the process and systems, and then fourthly in the larger organization. Typically consists of the operational activities and your the core elements of an organization. What that means is if there is a manufacturing company, right? So the manufacturing elements of operations come into existence. If it's a services company, then the whole scheme of how the service processes are working out and how they can be automated through, okay? Or if it's a simple say consulting company, if you will, right, part of services, then you see what part of consulting produces what sort of services as a product, and then how much of that can be kind of automated through. So that is the purpose behind this matrix. Now if you take from a customer, right, standpoint, the digitized, typically for a customer, and the larger purpose for digitalization is to give the right customer experience. That's the bottom line here, okay? Now to do that, what is required? You create omni-channels where you can directly communicate and you have multitude of communications with the customer. Then you have analytics. That means whatever has happened through the channels and whatever data you've collected, you start analyzing it. You might use AI and the other factors as platforms to get an outcome from there for deeper insights. Then you use social and digital media for marketing, for directing one-on-one to that specific persona that you're trying to get hold of for your relevant services or your products. That's how typically customer layer works, okay? And when you're digitalizing, that's when you start thinking in that foray of things, right? The customer experience. For products, right, you in the current juncture of the world, right, everything is as a service. So you put product into subscription mode and other elements, and how does this happen? Because of digitalization. And then you start thinking in that direction. So digitized products and services in a fashion which can be used as per the way the customer wants, all right? So you do it as a service or a pay-per-use like a subscription model and so on and so forth. It should be available in various platforms, be it mobile, be it your laptops, your PC, your different operating systems or whatever, or virtually to that, right? Even if something can be linked from a discrete perspective, just from a layer of say maybe a KDP or one of those, right? So that is how the second element of products work. And if you would have heard, and again not to overwhelm you, right? Bring your device, things like that, the BYD of the world. This is all made possible because of digitalization, right? You can get a device, plug into something, and you're on. You can start using whatever you were using wherever you were earlier. Okay, so that's how BYD works, or that's meant by like virtualization of activities. Okay, so that's where the products get kind of, and you see most of the products are now subscription based, right? Right from your channels that you see on the TV to a level of the software that you use. Okay, everything is on per use basis now, and this is only because they were able to digitize it so much. Now also please relate, right, the fact that I talk about digitizing sometimes and I talk about digitalizing sometimes, right? Digitalization is a whole gamut where small digitizations have happened, okay? So please take that into view when I'm mentioning what I'm mentioning and don't get confused with that. So with that said, the process and system, right, one of the most important things, the processes and the systems, that's the key role of digitalization, because if they are not, then your larger purpose is always defeated. So with that said, the operation has to get digitized by virtue of your process and systems getting completely digitized at individual level so that it performs a larger digitalization activity. So what goes into this? So customer focused interactive platforms. I mentioned UI UX. That is one of the large purposes. How this is done is virtue of agile execution, right? And if you remember, I was giving you an example that you cannot, the breakpoint has to be managed in a fashion where the work doesn't come to a stall, right? And so the work continues while you're doing all the whole digitization processes everywhere and then resulting into the larger digitalization. You use agile systems, all right, to do that, which is moving things in discrete steps, which I covered in maybe Rise 1 or Rise 2 and I think Rise 3, where we mentioned that we do things in discrete steps, take smaller functions, complete it, test it and confirm it until you move to the next one, where this forms the holistic view eventually, all right, so that you don't have to repeat for the larger systems, because managing a larger systems is always a problem. So smaller systems, and that's where agile comes into play. It's one of the industry terms for executing maybe technology related activities. Okay, now it's being used in business as well. So and then the devices, right? Whatever devices, wherever devices in whatever part of the world, in whatever platform, should be able to use the process and system the way it's supposed to get executed. We discussed the BYD in the previous one, right? Same principles go here. Then at an organization level, what? You have digitized the whole organization, which means each function of the organization gets automated, be it HR, be it finance, be it accounting, be it admin or whatever that exists out there as a larger function, right? CRM, sales, this and the other, the entire whole shenanigan of what a corporate runs by. So digital enterprise functions also has to get discretely done, and we'll cover that in the framework. Followed by digital, the virtualization activity, which I mentioned through. Any device can play from anywhere. So that's one of the key requirements when you automate these things. Because if somebody is traveling and is not enabled to do this, it doesn't serve the purpose. So that is the larger purpose behind this as well. Okay. So anywhere, wherever they go, the speed counts and they should be able to adapt to it and then log into the systems wherever, whatever they do from whatever part of the world they are in. Or even in the flight, by the way. If there's internet, they should be able to do this. Now, internal and external ecosystems, right? The very purpose of creating that is that, right? We discuss ecosystem, we create the, the whole eco environment that they want to create there. So, both for internal and external usage, because the partners will also have to get enabled. And without partners not being enabled, it's still in the manual mode. So, in the whole larger digitalization activity, the partners will also have to get automated, okay? Otherwise, it's half battle won. So this is what encompasses in that matrix. So it's very important to know that what goes on in the larger scheme of things to cover the whole digitalization aspect for the final goal, and it goes in layers. So the matrix helps in that perspective, so you can see the approach. Now let's jump into the framework for digitalization implementation, right? What goes into this? Now this will follow through with what are those 6 steps taken, right, for a particular element, maybe one function, to start doing things completely. Okay. For example, you start with the number 1 activity there, right? The first step approach will be to digitize at least one of the function. Say HR, we mentioned HR, finance, procurement, supply chain, and all the other ones. So suppose you start with HR. Okay. You can also start with finance, etc. And I mentioned the fact that the larger the organization, the more the chaos will happen. So it's always suggested as best practices to go through one function, then go to the next, then the third, so that all the nuances and all the cultural and the other issues that come to existence is taken care of in the first one, so that you don't meet with the second one. But if you meet across with all of them together, you're meeting a disaster there, right? Everything gets stalled. So you start with one function, you start automating that, and suppose you use HR to get automated, then it would mean that you put an ERP, which is HR, you put the module of HR from the ERP and automate that. Then once you automate it, that means you've implemented the infrastructure, you put the applications in place, you've put the processes in the automation mode out there, and now you make the people start using it. All right, and that's when the larger problem happens. They'll say they don't like this, they don't like that, and so on and so forth. Then you create a change management exercise. So the MVP comes out, that is the minimum viable product. People use it, they will give you feedback, you change it, you go to a second round, a third round. So whole design thinking elements come to existence. All this works in an agile format, right? Smaller functions every time, and they then eventually get the larger process, which is then completely automated, and you come out with people using it as well. Okay, and that's part of the change management exercise for people usage. Clear? So that's number 1. Number 2, environment automation digitization. What does that mean? Right? We discussed some time back that there would be people who have made reports in paper form and printed and kept it, or they would have written by hand and kept it, or whatever that is. All that has to go into automation. Okay, and automation would mean they put it into a file system and eventually into a database which can be used whenever asked for, and will then get whatever computed along with the new data, so that the final report that is required can be. This could be historical data. This could be data from a finance background where you have to check out, what the CAGRs, and if a procurement was done, then what happens. Or from an HR perspective, who had left, who is joined new, is the gratuity taken care of, is the DA taken care of people from the last 10 years, and so on and so forth. If they were on manual system, that whole thing has to get automated. So that is the digitizing process. Okay, so that also has to happen. Otherwise, it is again incomplete. So we talked about automating processes in the first one. Now we talk about digitizing whatever the paper trail that exists from the past. And then there is, optimizing IT. Now once you do this, your data is getting collected more. Now maybe the systems that you already exist are not able to manage that data to that extent. So hence you might, in the new scheme of things, want to move everything to cloud, where the data centers are taken care by external sources, and or you can create your own data center as large an organization is, and then start managing your servers. To do that, what sort of optimization needs to take place is what comes into this existence. So then you make a cloud engineering roadmap, and again see the gaps, and then fill up that with the new latest servers or the power systems, etc., what is required to do that exercise. So that happens as a third step. Then as a fourth step, the change management. So now once all this has happened, I mentioned that once our human people, when the humans start using it, then it goes through a churn, right? There will be resistance, people don't want to use new systems, or they will be just disappointed with the color on the screen or this. That is all done with the change management. I mentioned the fact that while change management is happening, you'll get a lot of feedback. It's part of your MVP activity. And also at the same time, once the whole system is ready, you need to train the people, okay, to use the system to the optimal level. Otherwise, again, it's half-baked. So once the people start using it and adopting it, that's the word there, and once they adopt it, right, they will also have to make it, available to learn for new people who join. Maybe you might start with a smaller group there, right? Then you use terms in change management like train the trainer or the champion trainer, etc. You train these guys in the organization so that they are not dependent on you, and they take on your legacy to start training the rest of the people in the company or the organization that you're working for as a digitalization expert. Now, what also happens is that once you move out after digitalization, right, there's a continuous improvement that needs to take place. If you are no longer a partner where the company doesn't, think that they can manage affairs, you also need to make systems work where these champions or train the trainers continuously do things where the improvement keeps on happening, right? Because of the changes around or whatever the reason is, or at least they point out and get the partners at the right time to do the needful. Okay, so that is part of the change management exercise. So there's continuous improvement, and we'll touch upon at the right time where there are specific steps and frameworks to do that as well. Okay, from that we jump into governance, which is interoperability and standardization. I mentioned that earlier, that all the applications, all the infrastructure systems, etc., have to talk to each other in synergy, and they have to get synchronized because the data exchanges will happen. New data will be created, earlier data will exist, all right, and the new data should supplement with the older data, and so on and so forth. So the reports that come out and the interfaces that are created has the optimally and the single source of truth, so that you get the right reconciliations when you see an outcome from there. Okay, so that is the purpose of governance. Okay, it's a very deep topic. I am touching the surface right now because again there will be enough to be digested right now. So with that said, the continuous improvement, right? I mentioned that during change management exercise from a human perspective, but from the system perspective, right? If there is a change in their processes, or if they want to adapt new system because the future requires, or the competition isn't better, or the strategy changes, or the cultural environment requires, so there is a continuous change happening, right? Now, continuous improvement is part of that. Your basic systems are in place, but once they start maturing, you need to improve them to come to the point where you want them to from the new changes. Okay, the very purpose of digitalization. So this is where continuous improvement happens, and I told you that we will discuss that topic at the next subsequent ones. So framework of digitalization is all about this, and it's a practical view and approach. Takes lots of time, but I hope you got a view and the gist of this, that how this system works, all right, as a framework, and you will require, hence you will require partners to work with you to enable this as an execution exercise. But from a consultative perspective, if you understand this, your reports can be passed on to your customers to convince them that what goes on in this activity and where all it has been applied earlier. Okay, and the very key reasons for each of the 6 steps, right? So with that, we'll jump into the tools required to do this. Okay, let's go there. I'll see you in a minute.